Good afternoon, everybody. This is Will Meurer. I'm an associate professor of emergency medicine and neurology at the University of Michigan and one of the course directors of the clinical trials methodology course. I'm here to talk to you today about some preliminary aspects of what the clinical trials methodology course is going to look like in 2021, and I'll provide an opportunity for any questions to be answered here. First, I want to just recognize the other course directors, Dr. Roger Lewis at Harbor UCLA, Dr. Lori Gutman, formerly at the University of Iowa, now at Indiana University, Dr. Robin Conwit at NINDS, Dr. Christopher Coffey at the University of Iowa, and then myself. So, what does the NINDS clinical trials course aim to do? So first, we work to identify promising investigators who have clinical neurosciences questions and provide them with a rigorous foundation in the design, funding, conduct, and monitoring, oversight, ethical performance, and reporting of patient-oriented clinical research with a focus on clinical trials. We also work to promote your ongoing professional career development, both before and after the course, and are working to enhance the pipeline of well-designed, well-thought-out, scientifically sound, early-phase clinical investigations so that we can continue to move the field forward and discover new treatments and new treatment paradigms for important neurological diseases. So early trials are hard, and expertise in planning early clinical trials is not evenly distributed. We want to help people design early trials that can lead to scientifically interesting results that can help inform the future scientific steps. And the clinical trials methodology course has been funded to address a gap in the planning process. So some of the key aspects of what is expected of trainees in the course is that you need to be the scientific leader of your project. So we operationalize this as you would be the first author of the paper that comes out of this, or would be the PI who's submitting the IRB. You should be ready to conduct a trial like this. And you should also have the tools, including a local mentor to support you, more than just a fellowship or director or chair, but somebody who has experience in doing trials at your institution to help you design, improve, and implement the study that you propose. We use and have used since the inception of this version of the course in 2013, a blended experience. This involves matching into project-based small groups where we have 3 to 4 trainees from diverse neuroscience backgrounds, led by a clinician with experience doing clinical trials in the neurosciences, and a biostatistics faculty who also has experience in doing clinical trials in neurology and other neurosciences. You have video group conferences with your small group in the spring and the fall. We additionally have some large group webinars that are open to the public. We hold office hours where people can ask additional questions. We have a residential course, and I think for 2021, we're calling it a residential course / intensive experience, because its precise details are sort of to be determined at this point in time as to whether it will be an in-person experience or a focused, immersive experience for a few days in the summer. And then we have a mock scientific review panel that usually occurs in November after the trainees have made substantial progress on both protocols and proposals. This is an evolution of the very highly regarded VAIL course, Designing Clinical Trials in Neurology. We had our 6 overall cohort in 2019. In 2020, we did not have a cohort as the planning of the 2020 cohort was interrupted by the global SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. We will continue to seek applications that are potentially interested in biomarkers, and we have ongoing funding through the NeuroNext DCC award from NINDS. So we do anticipate that some aspects of this are going to be similar and some will be the same. And I thought I'd change this slide because we don't know that we are likely not going to be in a position to require attendance at the in-person course, given travel restrictions may remain. And I changed it on a different slide, but here it looks like it's still the old dates for 2020. But you will be matched into small groups after the application process. There will be assignments in terms of protocol development initially. There'll be webinars that will help you learn about clinical trials. Some of them will be synchronous, some of them will be asynchronous. Some of them may be a flipped classroom type model. And we hope that you get a draft protocol sketched out prior to the in-person/intensive experience. Then you shift gears after that experience, having designed your clinical trial, to translate that into a grant application, unless you're fortunate enough to have unrestricted funds to conduct your clinical trial at your site. And we expect that the course is going to shape and change your idea, but continue to have local mentor engagement and flexibility. If you already know exactly what sort of clinical trial you want to design and know exactly how to implement it, the course may not be a good fit for you, because we believe that clinical trial design is an iterative process, and most clinical trial designs can be improved with iteration and feedback from other experts. Looking at some of the metrics that we've previously evaluated in the course, clinical trials is a relatively long commitment, and this is looking at some of the early trainees in our course and how many had gotten their protocols submitted, gotten patients enrolled by a number of years after the course. And we've continued to gather data on this, and we're continuing to use this data to improve the course and make sure that we can get you successful. So from those early cohorts, we've had a variety of folks who have been funded either for their projects or other projects that relate to clinical research. So we've had a good track record of ultimately somewhere in the neighborhood of over 50% of our trainees getting to some degree of funding for their clinical trial idea, whether it's locally or through an independent NIH grant within 2 to 3 years, and many are quite earlier. One of the key aspects of the course, and part of your role to determine if the course is a good fit for you, is to do an application. If you haven't applied to the course before, this is your opportunity to let the course directors know whether you have an idea that could be a good fit for the course. And I want to emphasize that there are some ideas which are great scientifically, but just simply may not be a good fit for the course, because we do have an emphasis on intervention. So a clinical trial means you're doing something to treat a patient or possibly treat a health system, to treat patients better, so that there needs to be an intervention. If it's a pure cohort study, typically that's not something that is a good fit for our course, but maybe the right scientific step. Some types of observational studies involving biomarkers, if there is a strong treatment component, could potentially fall within this rubric, and we just encourage you to interface with us early and often. Very early biomarker work that is kind of screening proteomics or genomics is generally not a good fit for the course, because the therapeutic link is quite downstream from those sorts of studies. So in what I would argue is probably the most important part of the application is you talk about the area that you want to study. And we do request that this be on one page. We want your ideas to be focused, But also, we want to make sure that you transmit to us the key areas of important scientific uncertainty in the field and a preliminary idea as to what trial design may be appropriate. And you can expect that us as the course directors reviewing this have some background knowledge of many, but maybe not deep knowledge of every single neurologic disease. So you don't need to spend a lot of time letting us know that stroke is the 5th leading cause of death in the United States, but talking about the individual level of the potential impact of your new treatment. In addition, we have a bullet point section where you answer questions in basically 1-sentence nuggets. This allows us to quickly get to the point as to what exactly you might be trying to study, what condition, what phenotype, if that's applicable, and what your real goal is for this phase of a trial, what clinical endpoint you may be using, and what kind of initial estimate of a sample size you believe is needed, with some idea of a range there, and what the next study might look like. And if you're doing something that involves biomarkers, please describe the biomarker and how it would interact with the treatment or inform a clinical trial design. We do look very carefully at your ideas for what might be ways to get your study funded. We want to help you develop a good clinical trial idea. One of the aspects of practicality is having the resources to do that clinical trial. And we find it important for you to think in advance as to where you may be able to argue for those resources. Sometimes it may be institutional grants. People have had great success with that. Sometimes it may be foundation grants. And sometimes it may be NIH grants. Knowing that the bar to do a clinical trial at NINDS really generally involves an R01 level grant. There are some K23s that have mechanistic clinical trials aims that could potentially fall within that. And again, we are only looking out for your future success, and we can certainly talk more about those sorts of things within the course, but being thoughtful about what might be funded. Another thing that is quite important is to also look at the NIH Project Reporter website to try to get a sense of the portfolio of what sort of research in the clinical space or the clinical trials space that NIH has funded before, to make sure that there may be not somebody else who's already doing your dream study. And I will emphasize that while many of our trainees would have clinical trial ideas that would be ultimately going to NINDS, there are a variety of other institutes that might have neuroscience portfolios and may have slightly different requirements for early phase clinical trial mechanisms in those institutes. You do not have to be writing a grant that will go to NINDS to participate in our course. The main criteria is that you are studying something that is a neuroscience problem. So studying stroke is something that would fall within our purview. Studying purely hypertension probably does not fall within our purview because that outcome measure is not directly neuroscience, although obviously the reduction of blood pressure can be closely linked to a reduction in risk of stroke. So generally, there may be some flexibility when there's a close relationship like that, but we want to see things that are targeted towards a neuroscience problem in our course. And that's where we have the great strength for you as the trainee in terms of our development. We don't have as much expertise in designing clinical trials in other disease spaces. We want you to talk about the team you have locally. And, again, this should be a discussion that you have with your chair or director at your site, so you know who these people might be. We will certainly invite these folks to some small group meetings, but we know that a lot of people have very busy schedules, so we don't make the small group meetings require their attendance. But also, thinking about how you would organize and interact with this team. Clinical trials is a team sport, and it takes a team. You need to have a bio sketch, which should be in current standard format, but please be sure to edit your personal statement to address why you think the course is a good fit for you and how it can help move your idea forward and move your career forward. We do want to see some involvement, some thoughtful involvement of mentors at your institution and potentially at other institutions, depending on the disease area you're in. But we do want somebody at your institution who knows something about doing clinical trials at your institution on your mentorship team, as we find that there are a lot of local quirks about making things work. So please work on those sorts of things as you prepare your application. Definitely these applications are not things that can be put together at the last minute. There should be some addressing of the mentorship plan, at least for this trial development, in the mentor's personal statement. And that's certainly something that you can offer to help draft for them to move that in a direction that you think is coherent with your plan. We need a letter from either your department chair or division chief describing the availability of some protected time for the first 2 years after the clinical trials course and the ability to attend the intensive experience in July, whether that's virtual or in person, again, to be determined, but also the small group meetings that will be about an hour every other week, and webinars that will also be about an hour every other week. So there's also needs to be some time that you will dedicate towards continuing to work on writing, scientific writing of your protocol. Also, you should report what sort of resources you might have locally to do the trial, if there's access to project management, data management, or other research personnel space and space. It's great to include those things because we definitely look at that in terms of whether your study may be practical and launchable. One thing that is important, if you are using an investigational compound, we need you to provide some written evidence that that compound is actually available to you and not something that's aspirational. Again, we know that sometimes when you're working with industry, if they're actively developing a compound for another indication, this can be a little challenging, but this is mostly to protect you and ensure that you're designing a trial that you will ultimately be able to do. So doing some pre-work, if you are planning to use a medication that could that is sort of in the pipeline for something else in your study, definitely you have to have some interaction with who controls that molecule, so that we know that you would be able to actually kind of progress with that idea. We were considering team applications in 2020. It's explained somewhat in our application instructions. Generally, this would be a couple of coordinated investigators who might have complementary skills. You could consider whether that's an investigator in emergency medicine and neurocritical care who are working on different phases of the care of TBI patients in a trial. Definitely looking for complementary expertise, but team science is quite important. So we are definitely open to that, and we'll continue to consider those for 2021. If you have applied to the clinical trials methodology course before and received prior critiques, you can use an extra page to respond to those prior critiques. If it's not been in the last year, you may want to contact the course directors initially just to get a sense as to if you're still looking into doing that project, to get some additional feedback as you work to craft that application. We do have frequently asked questions on our website, neurotrials.training. Here are some key things that have led to applications receiving lower priority scores. Number one is not proposing a clinical trial. It is the clinical trials methodology course. It's not a grant writing course. It's not a general clinical research course. So if there isn't a clinical trial element or some degree of biomarker development that closely informs treatment decisions, generally it doesn't fare well in our review. Proposing a phase 3 study is often problematic. That's not really the career stage that we are often targeting for this course. Again, you can certainly talk to us if you think your idea is too ambitious. It may be something that really should be going directly to StrokeNet or NeuroNext or Siren or some form of a different research group if you're not looking to do something multi-center in NINDS. Proposing an underpowered phase 3 trial to look for a quote unquote signal of efficacy. That's another thing that is a sort of design issue that it's a little harder for us to work with. So thinking thoughtfully about what sort of early trial design you need to answer your next question is important. If you lack a clear question or study, so you provide us with a lot of clinical background that this disease is bad, or this biology is promising, but we can't quite understand what it is that you're looking to, what uncertainties you're looking to reduce with the current study. Studies that lack preclinical data or were not the result of rigorous preclinical research can be problematic. We do know that there are certain disease types or types of situations that are less amenable to animal models, and certainly we are respectful of that. Certainly, if you are doing behavioral intervention, ensure that it's well grounded in appropriate biopsychosocial theory, etc. A trial design that has a sole emphasis on safety is usually problematic, even if you are told that that's what you should do first. Your early phase trial is an opportunity to learn, and typically safety events are relatively rare. It may be that you're doing in certain subspecialties, it may be quite important. Neuro-oncology comes to mind, that you may have intolerable treatments and you really do have to get a sense of tolerability. But I would argue that that's really more a feasibility study. How much of that drug can you get into people is really your question, not whether the drug is going to induce toxicities. So we find that sometimes people have an aim like, I want to show that this thrombolytic is safe in 10 patients or 20 patients. And given the rates of intracranial bleeding in stroke studies, it's going to be very hard to establish that with such a small sample size. You can show that it's not way unsafe, but to show that it's safe will be hard. So be cautious about safety as your main objective, because you're perhaps losing out on an opportunity to learn something more that will help you provide a more compelling case after you finish the trial you're designing, leading to the next point of not really understanding how you would use the data to do the next study. We sometimes see study designs and sort of proposals that initially come in, and we can be pretty sure what they're going to find based on the endpoints they're using and the sample size they have. And that, again, missing out on an opportunity to learn. Your study should have the ability to give you different signals, like I should go to the next phase, I should change something, or I should back up and come up with a new treatment paradigm. So if your study looks like it's going to go to the next phase no matter what, while that may be helpful for you, you're sort of logistically in terms of moving to the next step, those sorts of things are going to be seen as you apply for grants, in that you've already you sort of asked and answered your question within your grant application. And definitely you need to go and cover new ground in your study so that you're learning something important. Again, I apologize that I didn't find all of the references to 2020. If you change institutions in the middle of 2020, that's good. I just hope you're not hoping to change institutions in the middle of 2021 again. We find that since the course starts in the spring and then covers over July, investigators and trainees who are in the process of starting up at a new institution tend to have a lot of things going on. Moving to a new part of the country in many cases, learning a new system, getting onboarded, perhaps having more clinical commitments initially. So that is something that we look at kind of very seriously. So just bear that in mind. It's not to say it's an absolute problem. We've certainly had some people who've had success as they've switched institutions, but it requires often a lot of explanation and a lot of interaction to ensure that you're going to continue to have a good experience while you have a lot of other things on your plate. So I just don't underestimate how much of a life change it is to change academic institutions. All right, so I got the dates changed here. We will be opening the application portal relatively soon, or if you're watching this later, it will have hopefully already opened. We will initially have a deadline of February 28th, 2021. However, we may, for meritorious applications, particularly resubmissions, we may be able to make some decisions early, and and we as the executive committee of the CTMC will continue to meet and review applications. So if you have a complete application package in, and for those of you resubmitting from 2020, it may be relatively easy to put that together. We may be able to make some decisions regarding extremely meritorious applications even earlier. We hope to have all the decisions made by March 15th. At that point, we will have a small group match, and the way this works is in early winter, we will pair our faculty from clinical medicine and biostatistics into a series of small group times. These small group times will be like Tuesdays at 4 or Wednesdays at 11. And we will have approximately 6 or 7 small groups to potentially choose from. And the match will be you indicating your priority of which of those small groups that you could attend routinely. So it's not on a clinic day, it's not on an OR day, it's not on a day you typically have emergency department shifts, that there is some way for you to actually protect that time and keep that time open so that you can have meetings potentially probably every other week, but because of vacations and other things, we sort of ask people to block off that time every week initially, and then the small groups can tune that down to the meetings they need. The meetings will start sometime in April or May. We will likely be using Zoom or Microsoft Teams for the video conferencing aspect. Then we will have an intensive experience July 18th to 21. It's if there is an in-person component, it will be in Ann Arbor. And there are certainly, we're continuing to try to innovate and develop new paradigms. So we will keep you in the loop about those, but just be prepared to block off some time during those days. It's a Monday through Thursday. And what we will be doing then will become more clear by the time we're accepting you in the course in March.
Well, that should actually be July 19th through the 23rd.
Oh, 19th through the 23rd?
Through the 22nd. That's
22nd.
Monday through Thursday, yeah.
Thank you. So again, this sort of shows the timeline. All right. That was the main stuff I wanted to cover. I did actually want to just sort of briefly show the application just to show those sort of key points. So let me pull that up. So, there will be sort of you can see that this part of the application, this statement of scientific area, again, this is a key thing where you show why the area is an interesting area to look in and why you could potentially have impact in that area. We do have some links here to evaluating the rigor of preclinical research, underlying your idea. And then when I talk about these bullet points, again, this was on the slide before, but again, we're really looking for kind of one sentence answers here. So this allows us as the committee to just get a quick sense as to what the exact study you're doing is. And again, this is a set of these hypothetical answers, again, in phrases, you know, looking at traumatic brain injury, looking at comatose patients without extraaxial hemorrhage, you know, looking to see if my agent reduces cerebral edema, you know, and this is, you know, this. So I'm going to look at an outcome of cerebral edema in 20 to 50 patients to perhaps show proof of concept of my agent. This is the, you know, this is sort of what should be kind of laid out here. Obviously, you know, this is what would change practice. And then if you're developing a companion biomarker, be some way to look at brain edema without doing serial imaging. So that's in a nutshell the CTMC. I think I see a couple questions in the chat. Oh, I see Joy noting that I had the times wrong. So yes, July 19th through the 22nd, which is a Monday through Thursday. I'm now better oriented to time. And at this point, I would, you know, stop sharing. I'll welcome any of the others on the call to add, you know, add things to the Q&A or the chat. I think the one other thing that I would emphasize is, you know, particularly with that sort of bullet pointed summary, it can definitely help us to, if you're thinking about an idea, you know, that's probably the most straightforward way for us to quickly get you some feedback on your idea. Certainly you could send us more information, but we are often better able to respond with, you know, with that quick summary. Dr. Conwit has noted that we are exploring the idea of having this course work on a bit of a extended timeline. So knowing that there is a high likelihood that in-person travel may be still largely disrupted even in July, we may be working towards a initial protocol development process that looks very similar to what I have outlined, but have the opportunity for additional development to occur in a second year of the course for motivated trainees who are interested in continuing to develop their ideas over time and who have the sort of flexibility and the right sort of submission cycles in terms of the grants and so forth to do that. You know, we found that when we've looked at our outcome data, you know, many folks are submitting these grants about 1 to 2 years after finishing the course. So we think there may be real value in helping you to continue to develop your idea. And I know that many of the small group leaders have continued to provide advice and support to their trainees long after the course completed. So we may be working in some ways to formalize that so that even if you do go to a virtual experience in 2021, if you've continued to meet milestones within your course, you may be invited back in 2022 alongside a new cohort to work on different aspects of the development of your trial during an in-person experience in 2022. So yes, Dr. Comet points out that first year may be a more virtual experience with an in-person experience later. We've also had in-person experiences where we get the trainees together at the American Academy of Neurology. Again, we hope to resume doing that when the American Academy of Neurology is occurring in person. So we will be starting to accept applications after we tweak. You know, our application is close. We just need to do a little bit of tweaking to make sure that the input process and everything is perfectly well tuned. I anticipate that we'll be opening the application portal sometime in probably the first week of December. Certainly, if you are looking to do an internal K or some other project, it is quite reasonable to submit that and also consider being in the course. The thing that can be tricky in that situation, which we've had come up before, is if you're in the good position of both getting accepted into the course and getting your internal submission funded, as you will be in a position where you need to start doing your study. How we have had people approach that, it sort of depends on the situation. Oftentimes there are still residual issues that you need to work out regarding logistics, analysis, or other aspects, even if you do have a successful internal application. So we would definitely be interested in working with you in those sorts of situations. Those situations are a good problem to have because we have a good sense that you have some local resources to do the research. The way that we tend to get concerned in those cases, if we no longer have the ability to help you kind of steer your ideas towards where your faculty and your mentors, including your local mentors, realize that the design can potentially be improved to be more informative for you. So if you're, but there are definitely ways to work with that, and it's better to have something like that funded than to not. So we certainly wouldn't, but sometimes you're going to fall into a space where if you have an ongoing pilot study and you kind of need that information before you know how to design the next study, you know, it may not be a great fit for that year, but there may be some things you could do where there are a lot of other aspects of the future study that you can kind of plan, knowing that you are going to get that additional pilot data at some point before you launch. Particularly if we have a little bit more extended time to work with you in this 2021 pilot, where we may be keeping some people on for a renewal or a second year. I think there may be even more opportunities to work to allow the data of your ongoing pilot or early study to mature so that it can be incorporated into your design within the course. So definitely quite able to accommodate those things. And just sometimes timing matters in terms of where you are with your studies and moving between institutions. But we want to make sure that we can help you as much as possible. So there's a question about whether a pilot study on an imaging biomarker be appropriate for this course. So potentially, I think the best thing to do, and we've had imaging biomarkers in our sort of biomarker track before. The best thing to do is really think critically about how that biomarker is informing treatment, not merely informing prognosis. Like, are you going to do something different with that patient because of what you find on that? Or are you going to find a patient who maybe has severe disease, has really severe disease? You know, the latter, typically not a great fit for the course, but the former, we are going to personalize care based on an imaging biomarker in a way that hopefully will ultimately improve outcomes, is typically something that is more interesting for this course. It's definitely a heavier lift, and a lot of time there are aspects of imaging biomarkers that are unknown, but certainly, you know, consider giving us an email. On our website, we have a contact email that goes to Joy and me, and we can kind of triage those sorts of questions. And again, very interested in those sorts of things. It just depends on how well developed they are. All right. Well, I think at this point, I don't see any additional questions, and I really want to thank everybody for their attention today, and we will get this posted to the website, and we hope to see your applications in our portal soon. The contact email is ninds-ctmc-info@umich.edu. Hope you have a good afternoon.